Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube. And today I will be sharing with you all my March wrap up. In the month of March, I did not read as many books as I wanted to. However, I did end up reading 5 books, and I will be talking through all of those right now. The first book I read in the month of March was Sing and Buried Sing by Jesmyn Ward. This is split up between a few different perspectives. One of them is Jojo, and he is a young boy living in Mississippi with his younger sister, grandparents, and mother. He is getting ready to go with his family up to get his father out of prison because his father is now free. At the same time, we are also hearing from his mother's perspective. She is struggling obviously with raising her children on her own, but she's also really struggling with addiction and many other things as well. After reading the synopsis, I was not prepared for how hard this book was going to hit me. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Jesmyn Ward is an incredibly talented writer. I want to read so many more of her other books. This book also explores the legacy of slavery and racism in this country, specifically the American South, and what it has done. It transcends multiple generations with flipping back through times. There are ghosts as well that also add to the atmosphere and the storytelling of the novel as well. This is not an easy read in the slightest. It is incredibly hard to read. As I mentioned before, it's heartbreaking, and all the different parts of this book just when they come together, it's so hard to read, and by the end of the book I was sobbing. This book was definitely my favorite read of the month. The second book I read in the month of March was Pet by Akwakwé Emezi. This book is set up with the premise that there are no longer any monsters in the world. Jan has known this for her entire life, and this is just something that is accepted in the town she lives in, which is called Lucille. Then one day, Jan meets this creature named Pet, which looks very much like a monster. But Pet tells Jan that Pet is actually here to hunt monsters. And the monster that Pet is here for is actually in Redemption's house, and Redemption is Jan's best friend. Jan isn't sure what to believe at first because there aren't supposed to be any monsters left in Lucille, but together with Pet, she decides to embark on this quest to see if she can help and save her friend Redemption and Redemption's family. I chose this book because I wanted to read more by Akwakwé Emezi, and I was not disappointed. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The concept of this book is both interesting and brilliant. It sounds really simple, almost childish in its premise with the concept of monsters, like bad guys versus good guys. But I think that's exactly where the power of this book lies, because it seems so simplistic, but it's really not. Akwakwé Emezi, this is my second book by them, and they do such an incredible job with representation. Just the representation is enough to read this book in and of itself. The reason why it's so powerful is because the representation isn't the point of the story, it's just a part of the story, and that's what makes it so wonderful to read. I also thought the relationships in this book were incredibly strong and really, really great to read. I enjoyed reading the relationship between Jan and Pet, as well as Jan and Redemption. Especially the friendship between Jan and Redemption was incredibly heartwarming. To be honest, I was not as big of a fan of the writing style. I really loved Akwakwé Emezi's other book titled The Death of Vivek Oji because of the prose in that book, and this book doesn't have that prose, which is fine. And I also struggled a little bit with the names in this book. It's just something that I don't know, I couldn't exactly get past. That being said, I thought the message and the point of the story was so powerful, it overrode any of those issues that I had by the end. And the third book that I read in the month of March was a big book, and it was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is a huge book. I have not read a book this big in quite some time. I borrowed this book from my friend, and I'm really glad I got the chance to do this because this book has been on my TBR for a little while. This book is set in a world with north, east, south, and west, and each of these kingdoms are somewhat estranged from each other. In one of the kingdoms, the house of Barenthnet has ruled Ines for 1,000 years, and their bloodline is essential to keeping peace in the kingdom as well as evilness out, except every single day it becomes more and more dangerous for Queen Sabran to be alive, and this is where Eid comes in. Eid is an outsider at court. She's from a different kingdom, but she is pretending that she has renounced her old ways and she is protecting Sabran without letting Sabran know that she's protecting her. Meanwhile, across the sea in another kingdom, Tane is training to become a dragon rider, which she has wanted since she was a child, but very quickly she is starting to face some incredibly difficult decisions. I chose to read this book because this was my second chance for Samantha Shannon. I did not enjoy The Bone Season by her, and I thought I would give this a chance because this is more of the stereotypical and like normal fantasy that I enjoy, and I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. I don't know if this was a good second chance for Samantha Shannon, but it was really all I had to go from. To start with the positives, I think the multiple points of view was a strength within this novel. I think that it added to the character development as well as the world building and just really fleshed out all of the characters as a whole. I also think the world in general was pretty interesting to read about and really well done. I think the greatest strength of this book is the female representation. I read a lot of fantasy books and I read a lot of fantasy books with female protagonists, but this book really defies all of the stereotypes for women and girls in fantasy settings. It does it so subtly. There are just so many little parts where I had to back up and pause and say, wait, I had made an assumption that was clearly wrong, and that was really fun for me to read and push my perspective and change my perspective. The friendships and the relationships between women in this book were really well done. There's some great LGBTQ plus representation as well. However, that being said, overall this book was really like a hot mess. I was considering giving it 2 out of 5 stars for a long time until I came to the realization of the ways in which it was defying stereotypes of women in fantasy books. Because the writing was a mess, the plot was a mess, a lot of the characters were a mess, because while I said that the multiple POVs helped out the story, there were also so many perspectives that I just didn't care about, and I wanted to care about them. These were storylines that I should really be in love with and should be rooting for, but I just did not care and could not make myself care. The whole book itself, the plot, just kind of read like a checklist. Like, I felt that none of the characters truly struggled for what they wanted or what they needed, and that really shouldn't have been the case because that's not what this book is set up to be like. And I don't know if that's because this book should have actually been divided into more than one book and in a series, and maybe Samantha Shannon tried to accomplish too much within this ginormous volume, but I just really felt like the book was a disaster, and I kept waiting for it to rectify and fix itself, and it just didn't. Even by the end, I was like, oh my god, can this book just be over? So I'm glad that I read it, but I don't know that I'll be giving Samantha Shannon a 3rd chance, so we shall have to wait and see. The 4th book I read in the month of March was Coon by Zora Neale Hurston. It was published posthumously in 2018. Zora Neale Hurston in the 20s traveled down south to speak with Cujo Lewis, who is the man on the cover of this book, and she wanted to speak with him about his experiences as a slave because he was believed to be the last alive person who was enslaved in the United States and then became a free man. Zora Neale Hurston believed that his story was so important to capture because he was the last one who could truly give a first-hand account of what slavery was like in this country. I gave this book 3.5 stars out of 5. I totally agree with Zora Neale Hurston, and it is unfortunate that this book wasn't published until 2018, but I am glad that eventually was published. Cujo's story is incredibly powerful as well as important. His experiences on the African continent in his village, as well as his experiences on the plantation, and then his experiences as a quote-unquote free man in this country are so important and really offer a more complete view of U.S. history and during this time. I also think it offers a more nuanced perspective than I am used to getting within the classroom. So my biggest complaint, like so many other people, is I wish this book could have been longer. Cujo's story itself is actually only about 90 pages or so, and I just wanted so much more, and I just found that the other parts with all the appendices and the acknowledgements and this letter and that letter just kind of detracted from Cujo's story overall and kind of took away from it. That being said, I'm glad I read it. I did really learn a lot, and I think it's definitely worth the read, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Zora Neale Hurston's work, specifically her fiction, because previous to this I've read Their Eyes Were Watching God, but I want to read more of her work. And the last book I read in the month of March was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This book follows Deka, who is about to undergo a special ceremony to figure out if she is pure or impure. If she bleeds red, then she is pure, but if she bleeds golden, then she is impure. She has golden blood, and so she is deemed impure. Consequence for this is far worse than death, but she is offered the chance to go to a far off city and fight in an army for the emperor, and she decides to take this choice. When she gets to that city, she begins her training, but she is really trying to figure out who exactly she is, as well as what is going on in the city and the army that she is a part of for the emperor, and who exactly their enemy is as well. Before I get into this book, this was a highly anticipated book for me, and it's always a gamble, a risk when you anticipate books this much, because if you love them, then it's so rewarding and wonderful, but then at the same time you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, and it's not really fair to the book. So I went to this book with extremely high expectations. I think that kind of set me up for failure. That being said, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This book confronts so many challenging issues, such as misogyny, sexism, racism, colorism, xenophobia, abuse, trauma. The list goes on and on and on. There's so many things that are addressed and tackled within this novel, which I just found so powerful and well done. Deka as a character, I really liked her. I found her refreshing as a fantasy character because she had her flaws, but she also was able to really triumph and have really great moments as well, which is a wonderful balance to read. I also really enjoyed the friendships that she formed. This book really shows the strength that comes from female friendships. She is in an army with all women, and the power that she forms with these other women around her is so beautiful to read about and behold. Some of the commentary about the issues I mentioned previously really hit me hard. I mean, they were just so poignant and relevant, and I just think that Mina Forno really knew what she was doing when she was writing this book. That being said, I almost gave this book 3 out of 5 stars because for a while I really could not get into the writing style. I found this book extremely difficult to connect with the characters, and I just found it a little trite and a little staged. I will also say I was not a fan of the romance and the love story in this book. I just did not think it was well done or well written. There were many jumps in time, which I know some people have complained about. Those weren't an issue for me. For anyone who has read the Lioness Quartet series, you want to talk about time jumps, you can read that series. So the time jumps didn't really bother me in this book. It was just more of the jumps within the relationship that Deka has with her romantic interest. That being said, I really enjoyed this book overall. I thought it was incredibly well done. Those are all the books that I read in the month of March. If you have any questions, book recommendations, video recommendations, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I know I didn't do a great job with my uploads in the month of March. I wasn't very consistent, but I am ready to be consistent in the month of April. So stick around for those videos, and I will see you all next week.